In the previous tutorial, I showed how to put together a test scenario in Wenenu to test an Azure Site Recovery plan. The scenario only started and stopped the recovery plan in test failover mode, but did not test the state of the application running on the VMs. In this tutorial, I'm going to add steps to the scenario to see whether the application is functioning or not. From the context menu of the Wenenu tutorial test scenario, I click Edit to get to the Scenario Edit page. The scenario only contains the previously added Azure Site Recovery test step. Under the Virtual Network setting, I see the available subnets of the target virtual network. If I select a subnet, Wenenu will boot a VM in the selected subnet that will run a test agent. Test agents can be used to perform test steps to test the state of the application. The virtual network in this case has two subnets, one for the web servers and one for the database servers. This setup for the tutorial has only one server in each subnet, Web1 and DB1. I select the web subnet only, as I'm not going to perform any tests from the DB subnet in this scenario. I add the new test step by clicking on the plus sign of the Azure Site Recovery step, and I select the HTTP step type. I'm going to use this step to test the health endpoint on the web server. The health endpoint must respond with a 2XX status for a successful test. First, I need to select a test agent that will perform the test step. From the list, I select the Azure Site Recovery test agent in the web subnet. The host is Web1, the port is 80, protocol is HTTP, method is GET, and the endpoint is /health. I do not set a body or headers for the request. I add another test step, a database connection this time. I'm going to use this step to check the connection to the database, as well as to get the date and state of the last invoice recorded in the database. I select the test agent in the web subnet. Database server type is MySQL. I set the host, port, database name, and the database user. I do not want to store the password as plain text in the settings. I go to the Variables tab and I create a new variable by clicking the plus icon on the tab. Variables are global to the test scenario and can be used in various places. I give a name to the variable, in this case db-bwd. To make the value a secret, I click the lock icon on the right of the value field and I set the password. I go back to the Steps tab and in the password setting field I type a $sign and the name of the variable in round brackets. This is the format of variable usage in Wenenu. I add an SQL statement to select the date and state of the latest invoice in the database. I also want to test that the application does not return an empty response. To do that, I will use a small PHP script. I add the new PHP test step. The test agent is the one in the web subnet again. I select the 5.6 PHP version, and I add the script that gets the root of the application with HTTP and checks the length of the response. The script exits with 0 to indicate a successful test. Any non-zero exit value is a failure. I save the scenario. I go to the Scenarios page and I run the scenario from the context menu. I go to the Scenario Details page, select the Previous Runs tab, and open the details of the newly created execution. I see the 3 newly added test steps between the starting and stopping of the ASR recovery plan. I wait for the ASR test failover to end. Once the step is done, I can see that this time Wenenu booted the test agent VM as well. I wait for the HTTP test to finish to see that the health endpoint replied with 200 and the status is up. The database connection was successful and the query gave back the details of the last invoice. Also, the PHP step ran and the application did not return an empty response. In the next step, Wenenu deletes the VM that hosted the test agent and stops the test failover. I wait for the step to finish. It's finished successfully. The execution of the test scenario is done. Now I can be sure that the Azure Site Recovery plan can be started and the application is working on the VMs.